Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. A thin tether of domesticity. My new wife adopted a rescue dog that came into my surgery for a simple vaccination. Typically, I try to keep a professional distance, but she fell in love with the shaggy mutt, and I was trying to be a good father to her son, little Nate. She called the dog Catch. What fun it was to make catch fetch. Fetch catch, fetch catch. It was a big tease. Faking throw ball, making that big dog lope about looking for the ball. And one day, my stepson joined in the fun. Fetch catch, he cried, swinging his arm in that clunky toddler way. Catch followed the arc of the make-believe ball through the air, but suddenly something snapped in that canine mind, and the thin tether of domesticity severed when the dog realized it had been fooled by a small boy. Every dog is a wolf. Nate, a naked ape, didn't have a chance. I am a vet, and normally I am unaffected by blood and suffering. But this was different. My new wife lost her mind. And in that moment, I operated on a primal level of panic. I wrapped the gore in a plastic shopping bag and rushed Nate to the hospital, where the ER doctors stitched up his torn face like a patchwork quilt. But they were unable to reattach Nate's mangled arm. If only I'd been a few minutes earlier. If only I'd packed the arm in ice. I am a veterinarian, for God's sake. I am also a goddamned fool. I got back to the house that night, and first thing, I dragged the dog out behind the shed. The dog was innocent, I suppose. It was my new wife that brought the brute into our lives. Pitiful yellow eyes, whimpering remorse, the dog crouched low, and I blew its sorry brains out with my hunting rifle. Grief swells until it shrouds the entire universe in gray. Then it shrivels down to its hard black core and buries itself in your heart, where every other beat is a pulse of anguish. With grief comes anger, blame, and remorse. My new wife was a mess. The wounds healed, but Nate's face was puckered by scar tissue into a permanent rictus of surprise, and the shocking angularity of his right shoulder was a constant reminder of horror and loss. I spent a fortune on plastic surgery, which moderated the facial disfigurement so that Nate could move around in public without attracting too much attention. And when Nate was old enough, his prosthetic limb, the training wheel arm, was upgraded to a sleek, robotic carbon fiber contraption that he controlled by twitching the muscles in the shoulder. He was a passable imitation of a teenager, but joy and hope seemed absent. Sports and clubs and friendship too. He spent hours alone in his bedroom, The one-armed boy, her damaged son. Nate's mother was immobilized by grief, which soon turned to irreversible and ever-deepening depression. She grew thin and weak, listless and atrophied. Her face became an ashen mask. She became a passenger, a burden, useless to me. And she avoided the boy. She couldn't bear the sight of his missing limb. She couldn't bear the daily reminder of her terrible error. Finally, with her maternal and spousal duties fully abandoned, she one day went to collect the mail from the mailbox at the end of the driveway and never returned. Months later, her skeletal remains were found by a road cleaning crew on a quiet stretch of I-95. In her pocket, they found a picture of little Nate, pre-accident, still precious and whole, with his right arm draped over the neck of the dog. Madeline Marks, a comely senior at the high school, invited Nate to the school prom. It was an improbable match, but I was desperate to see Nate achieve a modicum of happiness, independence at least. So I said a little prayer and hoped for the best. Perhaps she was one of those do-good angels who tried to make everyone feel included, or who are blind to disablement. But something felt wrong. The children at Nate's school were relentless bullies, tortured Nate with minor humiliations. My suspicions were substantiated later that night when Nate returned home early, alone, in tears. He was carrying his prosthetic arm like a piece of salvaged wood. It was covered in filth and looked badly damaged. His jacket sleeve was torn. Someone had ripped the prosthetic limb from its exoskeletal shoulder mount. I intercepted Nate, got a slice of the tawdry story out of him before he stormed up to his bedroom and slammed the door. Evil sometimes wears a pretty face. Nasty Maddie, bad girl Maddie. I ask you, as a man, what would you have done? From grief to anger, from anger to vengeance and retribution. We are talking of a short journey. The next day, Maddie's mother phoned and screamed groundless accusations at me. Where was Maddie? What did Nate do to her precious daughter? Nate was a schemer, a druggie, a weirdo, a monster. I was worse. I created the monster. It was true. This was as much my fault as anybody's. As a father, I was a failure. Not that I ever wanted the role. The police arrived with a warrant. They confiscated Nate's computer, and they asked him a lot of questions, which caused the scars on his face and neck to flare up bright crimson with suppressed shame and rage. The police were persistent. This strange-looking boy with the disfigured face and the articulated claw hand was their prime suspect. But Nate knew nothing. Maddie left him and went off with an older boy. She was probably on the lam in Augusta or Portland. It was a lewd prank to impress a clique of friends. It was a high school hazing, a warped Stephen King dare. Onlookers, teen boys and girls, laughed at Nate as he tried to pull the prosthetic from out of the toilet bowl, where Maddie's boyfriend had jammed it into the trapway. Nobody helped. The police detective, a pit bull man, took notes. A prank would not account for Maddie's absence. Something more sinister had happened to her, he was certain. They'd check Portland, they'd check Augusta. But I could tell, right from the get-go, they were focusing their biased and ignorant investigation exclusively on Nate. The detective even started on me. What was I doing on prom night? Had I seen the girl, Maddie? Had I aided and abetted in a crime? Newspaper reporters were sniffing around, rifling through the trash. A TV station sent a van over and parked outside, looking for an interview with Nate or me. Someone threw a brick through the front window. Someone fired a gun at the garage. Maddie's mother hissed at me like a cat outside the supermarket. Strangers spat at me in the street. My clients canceled appointments, and my staff at the surgery resigned. Maddie's body parts were mostly found strewn about the woods near our house, along the riverbank, and wedged between rocks on the trail behind the nearby transfer station. Maddie's head was impaled on a railing fence near the town pond. With her remains discovered so close to our house, it only intensified the scrutiny. I kept Nate inside, fearing a lynching. Not that he had any interest in going out. Where would he go? What would he do? An itinerant was discovered living in a squalid camp in the woods on the south side of Bald Mountain. A creep, a hermit. His hovel was part hidden by a cave and a clump of gnarled hemlock. And the nearby forest floor was surrounded by scraps of animal fur and bones, grisly, rotting offal. He was a wild man in his 50s who'd been stealing from cabins and campsites, trapping animals in the woods. He'd been living in the woods for perhaps 2 years. A charred piece of Maddie was found in his campfire. Case closed, but not completely. I waited a little while until things had died down a bit, until Nate seemed capable of grasping my concept properly. He seemed slow to understand, then outright confrontational. Nate was repulsed by the idea. What kind of madness was this? His own stepfather? Did I not understand how truly fucking evil this idea was? What had possessed me? What kind of man would do that? It was wrong. It was sick. He wanted nothing to do with it. He would denounce me. I confiscated his phone. He tried to leave the house, and I was forced to fight him to the living room floor, where I subdued him with sprayed triple drip, that I used at the surgery to anesthetize livestock. When he came to, he was unyielding. There was no arguing with him. He would not see reason. I explained to him that it was too late anyway. In for a penny, in for a pound. There was no going back now. But eventually, I gave up arguing. Better to seek forgiveness than permission. I dosed him up for surgery. Once Maddie's arm was properly unfrozen, it turned out to be a pretty good match in terms of skin tone and musculature, though perhaps a bit smaller than I would have liked. Her blood type was compatible with Nate's, and the nerve endings and blood vessels were clean and undamaged. It would be a microsurgery marathon, but I was confident that I could perform the operation without any help. Perhaps I was never meant to be a parent. Nate seems to have adjusted reasonably well, though I don't see much of him these days, because it's best to keep him locked in his bedroom. Such rage in one so young. It can't be the arm, because to the casual observer, it looks quite passable, though a bit pale. And I know the operation was a brilliant success, because he recently hurled a can of Coke at me from the far side of his room and nearly knocked me unconscious. So vicious and accurate was the throw. Perhaps the melancholy is hereditary, but perhaps it's that twisted, scarred, and scowling face. Who knows how that might affect a young person? He only has one expression, and I sense that it makes him unfit for an independent life. Nate has one friend, another loner type, a gaming buddy called Jeremy, who'd came around once to help Nate fix his computer. He and Nate had some kind of falling out. It occurs to me that Jeremy has a very passable smile. Cockroach Girl. The floor underneath. Barry shuddered and swayed as they took a tight corner. The clattering whoosh of the dark tunnel drowned out the tired silence of the other commuters. Barry's sweaty hand threatened to slide loose from its cold metal pole, so he adjusted his grip and tried not to think about what had made it so sticky. Multiple people had relieved themselves in this car over the course of the day. The sickly sweet mixture of vomit and tangy excrement churned his stomach. Threatening to dislodge the chopped salad he'd had for lunch that afternoon, Barry felt the gray-haired woman next to him shift away from his lifted arm in disgust. He enjoyed the small reprieve of the starchy fabric peeling away from the wetness of his underarm, where it had been chafing all day. There was nothing to be done, he thought bitterly, unless she wanted him falling into her lap. He could smell the baby powder wafting up from her hair, and the crusty perfume from a bottle that should have been thrown out years ago. Barry threatened to go flaccid at the idea of her wrinkled, fat body jiggling under her itchy wool cardigan. She should be so lucky, he thought with a sneer. Barry turned his attention back to the more desirable object of his affection, the girl at the other end of the car. He felt hot blood rush toward the front of his groin, making it bulge against his tight polyester dress pants so hard he could feel the metal zipper of his fly dig into him. Barry couldn't take his eyes off her proper legs pushed together in an effort to take up as little space as possible and attract as little attention as possible. Her tight, office-appropriate skirt hugged her hips and thighs, exposing bare legs. Freshly shaven. He could tell from here she squirmed under his gaze. Barry adjusted his pants, even though no one on the bus was looking at him. He liked feeling like a potential threat. Barry knew he wasn't trash like the vermin around him. They all followed the rules. They went to work in their maze-like offices. They ate paste from tubes that barely resembled food. Humans were supposed to be apex predators. But the people who pressed in around him, jostled by the winding track, were so distant from their glorious biological potential, so detached from the instincts sharpened by thousands of generations of violence, that they had allowed their senses to dull irreparably from disuse, content to compete for scraps like the insects they were. But not Barry. He was in touch with his higher animal self. He used his God-given senses every day. And today, they were homing in on a target worthy of his attention. A girl he could tell would be a challenge. A girl who would force him to prove his manhood. A girl unlike the rest of them. This girl had her attention not on her phone, but on a book open in her lap. Barry craved the opportunity to see the title she was so engrossed in. He made a mental note to get closer to her when she got up for her stop. He also felt a surge of jealousy towards that book. He wanted to be the one who was in her lap, pulling her head back by the hair, taking what was his. The train jostled again as it went through another turn. The girl shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She knew he was watching her, yet she refused to meet his gaze. Barry found himself starting to get angry at her insolence. He deserved her attention. As if in response to his escalating need, the girl brought her hand up to her skirt. Barry's attention became rapt and utterly focused. The hairs on his arm stood up in arousal as he watched her, not daring to move, wondering if this was real. The girl reached underneath her tight little skirt and squirmed around. She had to be putting on a show. Otherwise, why would she do this? Barry glanced around, checking to see if anyone else was watching. But no one seemed to notice. The girl reached her hand all the way up between her legs, her expression unchanging, her eyes never leaving her book. Barry was now stroking himself outside his pants. He didn't care if anyone saw him. She was making him do this. The filthy little. The girl removed her hand from between her legs and pulled her arm out from under her skirt. She was holding something in the flat palm of her hand. Barry squinted and peered closer to see what it was. He stepped back in shock and confusion. Sitting in the girl's hand, antennae twitching, was a thick, 4-inch long, glittering cockroach. Its hard-shelled body, spiny legs, and beady head were unmistakable. The girl let it fall to the floor of the train, all without removing her eyes from her book. The cockroach skittered towards Barry. He let out an involuntary yelp that caused some passengers to finally look up and notice him. A businessman unceremoniously stepped on the cockroach, smushing its guts into an unrecognizable blob. The girl never looked up from her book. Barry wasn't a bad guy. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he needed answers. So, when the girl got off at her stop, he followed her. They emerged from the underground station onto a dark street. There was no moon out that night, and the glow of the street lamps were obscured by overgrown trees. The girl walked ahead of him, handbag slung over her shoulder. When they were finally far enough from the main road, where no one could see or hear them, he picked up his pace to catch up with her. Barry's footsteps crunched the leaves and twigs on the sidewalk, so his approach was anything but silent. He could see her tense up. Barry grabbed her by the shoulder and spun her around to look at him. He took a step back in surprise. There was no fear in the girl's eyes. It unsettled him. They usually looked more scared. He pressed on anyway. "What was that back there?" Barry asked. "What was what?" "That thing. Did you pull a cockroach out from between your—" Barry gestured helplessly at his own crotch. He couldn't believe what he was asking. "I think you should leave me alone." The girl turned around to continue walking, but Barry wasn't done with her. He grabbed her arm. "I think you should answer my question." "I don't owe you anything," the girl said, looking him dead in the eye. This disturbed Barry more than he cared to admit. They usually struggled to avoid his gaze. He was in uncharted territory, but he couldn't turn back now. His cock twitched hungrily. Maybe this could be fun, Barry tried to convince himself. He could break her. That would make this feel more earned, more challenging. He had been starting to get bored with his targets. Centuries of comfort and complacency had left the modern woman weak and pathetic. "I'm not done with you yet," he told her. Barry pushed the girl up against the retaining wall next to the sidewalk. This was usually when they screamed, but the girl didn't scream. She pushed him back. "Get off of me," she said forcefully, but Barry would not. He could not. He had come so far. He needed to know. He wasn't just here to satisfy his own primal needs. No, not this time. He needed to know what she had down there, what she was hiding from him, how she was able to produce. The girl kneed him in the groin, But Barry was not an amateur at this. He expertly leaned back to avoid a direct hit while still keeping his forearm against her chest, pinning her up against the wall. He pushed her knee to the side. "Hold still," Barry told her through gritted teeth. He was starting to get angry. "This will all be over soon." At last, he managed to reach up under her skirt and pull her underwear to the side. She had stopped struggling. He was grateful. Once they were convinced that there was no way out of this, they always ended up enjoying it. They would never admit it, but he could tell that they did. The girl was looking at him again, calmly. "Don't do that," Barry told her. "Don't do what?" "Look at me like that." The girl laughed. "You can't control me," she told him. "You're a dead man." Barry slapped her across the face. It was his turn to laugh. It was a humorless, forced laugh, mostly designed to disguise his fear. "You don't know who I am," he told her, more to convince himself than her. "You don't know my name. They'll never find me." Barry put his fingers in the space between her legs, relaxing into his victory. She was smooth, freshly shaven, just as he had predicted. But there was something else in there he could feel as he unzipped his pants and got himself out and ready. Something plasticky. A Nuva ring, perhaps. Or he didn't have much time to guess. The thing crawled straight out of the girl's vagina and onto his hand. Barry recoiled and flung it to the ground with a yell. What the fuck?" "Does that answer your question?" said the girl. "Crazy bitch." Barry's head was spinning. He had no idea how she did this magic trick, and he had no desire to stick around and find out. He grabbed his dick to put it back into his pants, but the girl grabbed onto him harder. "Hang on," she said. "I'm not done with you yet." She parted her knees invitingly. The girl once again pulled her lacy underwear to the side, fully exposing herself. Barry watched in horror as a beady little head and spiny legs clawed their way out of her, the antennae releasing themselves from her depths with a little bounce. It eagerly ran down the inside of her thigh, down her leg, all the way to the ground. It was followed by another and another and another. Some of them scampered down her thighs to the ground, then over to Barry's shoes, then up his pant leg. He tried to pull away, but she had his hard dick in her hand with a vice grip and wouldn't let him go. Why did it stay hard while he was so afraid? Why wouldn't his body listen to him? Barry didn't want this. Other cockroaches climbed out of her and crawled up her thigh, over the edge of her skirt, up her chest, and onto her shoulder, down her arm, all the way to his exposed flesh. They swarmed all over his body. Barry screamed. They made their way up his neck to his face, their delicate, spiny legs tingling his skin, causing Barry to jerk in violent fear and revulsion. He shut his mouth tight and continued to scream with it closed. No matter. The insects pushed in between, prying his lips open. Barry finally succeeded in yanking his penis out of her hands. He didn't care if it broke or if she peeled all of the skin off of it. He just needed to get out of there. But the cockroaches kept coming. The swarm grew bigger and bigger, finding their way underneath his clothes, into every orifice available to them. They overpowered him. Barry couldn't hold them out any longer. He covered his ears, but that left his eyes and nose and rectum exposed. Barry stumbled to his feet and fell to the ground. He choked on them. He could feel them with every sense of his body and brain, wriggling their way inside of him, unwelcome, filthy, suffocating. Time slowed for Barry. He knew only fear and blinding pain. The girl watched, impassive, as Barry lay twitching on the ground. During those final minutes of consciousness, Barry was freed from any stress, repression, self-loathing, or desire. It took 7 minutes for him to die. After Barry's body grew still, the girl picked her purse up off the ground where it had fallen. She hung it back on her shoulder and continued up the sidewalk on her way home. She left her babies behind to nibble at his corpse. Eventually, they got bored. The cockroaches scampered off into the night to scavenge for bits of food, hoisted into the dumpsters behind the dimly lit bars and tightly locked apartment buildings. Their grotesque image kept them safe. Fear kept them hidden. Disgust allowed them to move freely, unbothered in the shadows of the city. Like the girl, they were survivors. The fix, the shorts and t-shirt, clad exercisers of various shapes and fitness levels, sipping their beverages while panting, stretching, beads of sweat on their foreheads, drying in the cool evening air, dark patches on their backs and stomachs, glaring like mournful, weeping eyes, making you feel guilty about unused gym membership that's about to expire. The tapping keyboard pounders, lost in worlds of their own creation, focused on the words appearing on their screens, working or creating for themselves or others. Lidded containers overseeing, like proud agents by their sides, offering encouragement, support, reward in liquid form for their efforts, judging you for your collection of rejections. The well-dressed dog lovers, their own drinks an afterthought, as they busy themselves making sure their pets have enough water in their thoughtfully provided bowls and are sitting obediently, earning treats by not making a racket. Walker and walkie taking a well-earned rest before heading home, reminding you of haunted rooms you can no longer return to. The The lovers, the partners, the same-sex and opposite-sex couples, clutching hands across tables in one of 3 marquees around the hissing, steaming hazelnut, caramel, and vanilla-scented truck that has appeared in the park. Paper cup professors of caffeinated romance misting the air between glances with tendrils of tender loving steam, taunting you with wafting depictions of what was, what would have been, what no more will, the sights, the scents, the sounds of people alive, happy in this moment with their others or in their own skin, following their still unbeaten paths, writing the lyrics of their songs, being, doing, loving with some kind of purpose, forcing a lump to lodge in your throat when you question yours, a purpose you no longer have, and perhaps never did. The something you did have, the someone who you loved and who loved you back unconditionally despite your flaws and transgressions, the someone who gave you reasons to get up, to self-motivate, who inspired you to be better, to try hard, reasons that no longer exist, the shame, the warmth in your hand, in the quickly cooling air as you accept what the man in the truck hands you, the thanks you offer, insincere, as you meet his crystalline gaze and sever it, burnt by eye contact, by those smiling irises, contentment radiating from them like accusatory lasers, making you feel ungrateful for the life you have squandered and the breath you have taken for granted, the glitch-like, stuttering awkwardness with which you turn from that man in the pristine white apron and peculiar cocked red beret, refusing the lid and the napkins, head hung low as you seek out the most isolated table in the most empty marquee, ignoring all others as you move towards it. The laughs and snippets of conversation from people in person or on phones, chatting to family, friends, loved ones, giving household instructions, finalizing meetup plans, complaining about workloads that are stressful, making you wish you could call her about such things, making you aware of how much you threw away, the jerk of the head when you accidentally meet a woman's eyes, the ignoring of her friendly nod and greeting, the severe swerve in another direction, to slink into a seat in a lonely corner, the escape, the length of gauze wrapped around your knuckles, successfully preventing color seeping through, the clean vinyl tablecloth on the rickety picnic table, the coarse wooden bench tucked beneath, the absence of someone taking a seat beside you with their soy milk, gluten-free latte, and blueberry muffin, the swaying attendee dressed like the vendor in beret and apron, but beyond that clad in denim, head to toe, feet strapped into hobnail boots thoughts, meandering from table to table, marquee to marquee, like the needle in a broken compass that can't find north. Cloth in one hand, multi-purpose cleaning spray in the other, squirting, wiping, cleaning in no rush, smiling to no one. He ambles, a grateful glint in his green eyes, the smooth, milky liquid in your mouth as you lift your uninjured hand and tilt your head back. The difficulty swallowing the lump, the warmth flowing into your chest, melting the frozen surface of your cracked, glacial heart, the guilt, the thought of the note in one jacket pocket, the words for your mother, the apology, the weight of the newly purchased box cutter in the other, the shameful plan, this unexpected stop on the way to execute it, the coffee truck and setup that wasn't there that morning or ever before, when things were normal, the same, when you tried and made an effort to be strong, when you were wanted by someone better than you, though you had little to offer, the rising, silvery disk squinting behind jostling clouds, the quieting day, the fading light, the blinding, screaming, retching recollections of champagne and cake and celebration for a writer's work selected for publication, the realization of a long-held dream, the receipt of long-awaited recognition, the saccharine sweet story of success, but hers, not yours, the act, the other attendees, oozing out of the truck, also in aprons and berets, with eyes that stir and probe, smiling as they enter the marquees, nodding at patrons, pleasant, friendly, nice, busying themselves, loosening ties on poles that hold up side panels, letting white PVC barriers drop to the grass, shutting out the park, the trees, the darkening sky, the faint lunar reflection, broken and distorted in warped, uneven plastic windows, the people in your marquee and others finishing their drinks and standing up, prompted by this closing up routine, the wooden panel in the truck's vending window swinging shut, the shuffling of feet and yapping dogs, the froth and bubbles in the golden brown liquid in your hand, spinning as you swirl it round and round, the lowering level of the fluid as you lift, tilt, gulp, watching it diminish like time, the last marquee, side panel, dropping, trapping you inside like another prison, beyond the ones of meat and bone and thought. Your cellmates making for the loose, hanging flap that is an out, the man reading the newspaper, the woman nursing the baby, the teenager scrolling on phone, standing up and striding from their tables, taking up position by the door, the sudden screams from unseen marquees on either side, making you jump, spill your last precious ounces Knock the bench to the ground as you marionette up the utterances of shock and surprise, the disbelief and confusion, the discarded newspaper, the babyless bundle of dropped towels, the dark screen phone cast aside, the side panels rising as berated, aproned attendees duck under and in, silent, smiling, shifting like sidling snakes, the flash of pointed teeth as their lips splay wide, the panic, the joggers, the dog walkers, the writers and bound in love souls pounced on by newspaper reader, fake baby feeder, pretend phone, scroller, and others, knocked onto tables and to the ground, clawed and pawed, clothing torn, chests and necks exposed, the yelping dogs that escape into the night as masters and mistresses shriek, the box cutter in your hand, your finger on the switch, the blade click, click, clicking forth, the fear clutching your heart like a pair of hands, throttling the image, the hand on your forehead and the arm around your chest as you hold the blade out to defend, the unbalancing tug, the forced turn, the visage of evil, hovering close, like in a mirror, the beret, the crystal eyes, the gaping maw and teeth, the hypnotic stare that pulverizes the fragments of your clay heart and causes your body to stiffen, the face craning close, the hot breath on your neck, the pop and puncture of flesh, the memories, broken glass, shouted insults, anger bloomed from the seeds of perceived failure, raised fists, temperatures, voices, bruises and blood, the teeth sinking in, cold like daggers of ice, the frozen lips clamping to flesh with rubber-like suction, the precious source of life exsanguinating out her face, screaming her dismay. She gave you everything, all her trust and faith, her support. She believed in you. You let her down. The death of love, the box cutter, propelled by instinct, blade slicing through tissue-thin flesh, serrated edge carving up gristle, the steaming, warm essence of all things that live washing over your hand, the gauze bandage stained red at last, the chuckle in your throat as a monster drinks its fill, the realization of futility as a monster surrenders, the smile on your lips, the roll of your eyes, the abandonment of hope and acceptance, the curse of being a coward to the end, the story. What was the story? What was it called? The relief, the story, the one that she wrote, the one about vampires, the release, the vampires who get their caffeine fix from blood, the revulsion, the blood that drains out of your veins. Now the story is yours. The shadow, the night was silent, draped in an inky darkness that swallowed the world outside the small security room. I sat alone, surrounded by an array of flickering screens that illuminated my face in a ghastly blue glow. The hum of the surveillance equipment was the only sound in the room, its monotony broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling or the distant wail of a siren. I was the lone sentinel, tasked with safeguarding the premises during the bewitching hours of the night shift. Hours had passed since I settled into my chair, my eyes diligently scanning the labyrinthine halls and desolate rooms of the building. Everything appeared as it should, empty, lifeless, and eerily quiet. But as the clock ticked deeper into the night, a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The air seemed charged with a palpable tension, as if something sinister lurked just beyond the reach of the camera lenses. I leaned forward, adjusting my seat and peering closer at one of the monitors. In the dim light, the corridor appeared to stretch endlessly, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, ominous shadows on the walls. As my eyes darted across the screen, I saw a movement, a mere blur at the edge of the frame. My breath caught in my throat, and I focused on the camera, my heart pounding. There, in the grainy black and white footage, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its features obscured by shadows. The figure moved slowly, almost purposefully, down the hallway, its gait uneven and unsettling. I squinted, trying to make out any distinguishing features, but the face remained hidden. Shrouded in darkness, a shiver crept up my spine as I grabbed the radio at my side. "Central, this is security. I've got a visual on an unidentified person in Corridor C. I need backup." Static crackled before a voice responded, thick with sleep. "Copy that. We're sending someone your way. Stay on the line." I nodded, my eyes never leaving the screen. The figure continued its eerie saunter, disappearing momentarily from one camera's view, only to reappear on another. It seemed to be toying with me, always staying just out of clear sight. A phantom in the night. Minutes dragged on like hours as I awaited the arrival of my colleagues. The figure persisted in its haunting stroll, growing closer to the main entrance with every passing moment. I gripped the edges of the desk, my knuckles turning white, and watched in dread as it reached the lobby. As if sensing my gaze, the figure turned its head toward the camera, and I gasped. Its eyes, 2 points of cold, blue light, glowed in the darkness, fixated on the lens, as if it could see me. I recoiled, my heart pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. "Central, it's looking at the camera," I stammered into the radio. "I need someone here now." The response was a garbled mess of static and fragmented words. Desperation clawed at me, as I watched the figure approach the security room. It moved with an unnatural grace, its movements silent and deliberate. My fingers fumbled for the door lock, and I managed to secure it just as the figure reached the hallway outside. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room, and I pressed myself against the wall, my breath shallow and rapid. I could hear its footsteps now, soft but deliberate, as it approached the door. Each step sent a chill down my spine, and I prayed that the lock would hold. The figure stopped just outside the door, and I held my breath, willing myself to be invisible. Through the frosted glass window, I saw its silhouette, tall and imposing. Its hand reached out, fingers curling around the doorknob. I bit down hard on my lip to stifle a scream. My entire body tensed, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. Seconds stretched into an eternity before the figure withdrew its hand, and I heard its footsteps fading away down the corridor. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The building seemed to groan and sigh around me, the very walls whispering secrets that I couldn't comprehend. Summoning my courage, I cautiously unlocked the door and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, devoid of any signs of the figure. I hesitated for a moment before venturing out, my flashlight casting shaky beams of light across the walls. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and I could feel unseen eyes watching my every move. I retraced the figure's steps, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Each flickering light and distant sound sent my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that the figure was still there, just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I finally reached the lobby, my eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. The room was still, the silence broken only by the distant wail of sirens. I let out a shaky breath, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Whatever had been in the building with me was gone, but its presence lingered, a haunting memory etched into the very walls. I made my way back to the security room, my steps quickening with each passing moment. As I entered, I glanced at the monitors, half expecting to see the figure staring back at me. But the screens were empty, showing only the empty halls and deserted rooms. I sank into my chair, my hands trembling as I reached for the radio. Central, this is security. I think it's gone. I don't know what it was, but it's gone now. The response was a crackle of static. And then a voice came through, tinged with concern. Are you all right? Do you need medical assistance? I hesitated for a moment before shaking my head, even though I felt far from all right. No, I'm fine. Just shaken up. I'll be okay. The sun began to rise, casting a faint light through the windows and dispelling the darkness that had settled over the building. My relief was palpable, but the memory of that night would forever haunt my dreams. I had come face to face with something beyond explanation, something that defied logic and reason. As the day shift arrived to relieve me, I gathered my belongings and made my way to the exit. The building, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien and menacing. I stepped out into the daylight, the warmth of the sun, a stark contrast to the cold grip of fear that still clung to me. I glanced back at the building one last time, my eyes drawn to the security room window. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement inside, a shadowy figure standing amidst the monitors. But it was gone in an instant, leaving me to wonder if it had ever been there at all. I walked away, my footsteps quickening with every step. The world around me seemed to blur, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a nightmare. I didn't know what I had encountered, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Some things, it seemed, were better left in the darkness, where they belonged. The identity thief. This is the hunter's badge of glory, that he protects and tends his quarry, hunts with honor, as is due, and through the beast to God is true. Jagermeister, by Oscar von Riesenthal, taken from the back of a Jägermeister bottle, half full. I am left to imagine the circumstances of a most unusual case, which has the Grimlace's handiwork written all over it. The Grimlace has stolen another victim's visage and memories, leaving her a withered amnesiac. She was wandering ghost-like amid the streets of Frankfurt, with no idea how to return or where she called home. My name is Hildegard Köppen, I tell her, but everyone calls me Hilda. Pleased to meet you. And she trails off, unable to remember her own name. It's okay, my dear. This is all quite normal, I tell her. I turn on my dictaphone and make my report. It is 23:36 in the evening. The patient's name is Greta Thunderberg. The patient is approximately 32 years of age, according to confirmed medical records. Greta presents with symptoms of sudden onset retrograde amnesia. She reports no memory of her whereabouts, or how she reported to Polizeireiterstaffel HE off the River Main. She complains of persistent tinnitus, disorientation, and a total loss of recent memory, as well as an inability to recall various aspects of her personality, or apparently, her own name. When asked if she is a serious person or a fun-loving one, she says, "I hardly know myself at all. I couldn't say." When asked if she enjoys large gatherings and social occasions, she says, "I should like to try it and see." She is completely flat. When asked, "Are you upset about your present condition?" she says, I feel fine. Her face is frozen, as if she has had an excessive amount of Botox serum injected. There are neither any signs of physical trauma nor any indication of the use of surgical instruments, and the blood work is normal. My diagnosis is that there has been a sudden hypoxic event and a hardening of neural connections occasioned by calcification from exposure to chemical antagonists, causing sudden onset retrograde amnesia, all of which is consistent with a Grimlace attack. I release the patient back to her police escort, who thanks me and is on his way. Brainy. That's me. Cut it, treat it, study it. I do it all. Neurosurgeon, neurologist, and neuroscientist. Check, check, and check. And you can add dissect it to that list. Did you know that forgetting is actually part of the learning process? I'll bet you didn't. But not everyone has brains on their mind like I do. My true calling, however, is the hunt for the Grimlace. I have been stalking this freak of nature for over a decade. But this is the first time that I have ever been able to anticipate catching my quarry and finally seeing what it is made of. We are the Knights of Kadosh, a sect of the Scottish Rite. We are closely aligned with our brethren, the Knights of Tavistock in St. Petersburg. We hunt monsters. And my special assignment these many years is to rid the world of the dreaded Grimlace. After all this time, I have finally found a witness to the first Grimlace attack. Just past 1 o'clock in the morning, Agatha is coming to life. The tea kettle is whistling in the kitchen, and Agatha hums as she pours herself a cup, her hand shaking as she tips the kettle. Although Agatha was a precise woman and always had her hands perfectly manicured, the ends of her nails are growing out with ragged abrasions, and the nail polish is badly chipped. Our shared apartment is a high-rise at 140 West in West End Sud. There is a view of the city skyline and the Taunus Mountains beyond. Where have you been, Heidi? I've been worried, Agatha asks. Interviewing a victim of an attack, I say with a shrug. I called you 2 hours ago. Remember, Mum? But what about your dinner with Renee? Did you forget? Agatha asks. That was last week, Mother. Is someone changing your calendar? She asks, hands on her hips. You know there are a lot of doctors that want your position in the Faculty of Medicine at Goethe Universität, who would do anything to get you out of there. Oh, Mother, no need to worry about me. Did you watch your show? Is it already 8? Agatha asked. Mother, it is nearly 2 in the morning, I tell her, and walk into my study. I have to finish some work, Mum. Get some sleep. I can barely stand to look at her when I can't do anything about it. My mother was a fine physician and a woman of prominence. She has now been reduced to this dwelling invalid who sulks about being imprisoned by her own mind. I know she won't turn in until the sun comes down. I have given up trying to get her into a normal sleep schedule. After all, it is not as if I have one myself. She'll just sit on the balcony now, staring into space, as if the vista of the horizon will give her a chance to remember that she is in the process of forgetting. It has taken nearly a decade, but I am able to locate the stagehand who was present the night of the first Grimlace attack. The English theater was playing Saint Joan of the Stockyards, and Diril Verloren had top billing on the playbill. Luis recalled. I've heard of that play. He was playing the meat-packing magnate, Pierpont Mauler, Luis says. And you were there, watching from behind the curtains, during the entire play? I ask, jotting notes. Not the whole time, Luis says. Where did you go? I ask. At one point, I ended up going out back in the alley to have a cigarette, and found the understudy, Roach, speaking with a strange-looking woman. Luis says. We will come back to that, I tell him, blowing at some hair that has come untucked from my ponytail and is dangling over my left eye. What did Diril look like? Diril was a tall man, about 6'4", just stunning. He had a lean, lanky build. His coiled hair hung down in a shag cut. He had large, straight, white teeth that gleamed in the stage lighting. He had really bad ADHD, with a cutting, manic intellect. He was always gesticulating and animated, and always at an 11 out of 10. Luis says. Was he under the influence of anything? I ask. Other than his own self-importance and fame, you mean? Amphetamines? Adderall was pretty standard. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, Luis said. I think that addiction is an impermanent solution to a permanent problem. How was the performance? I ask. He was a star. I remember his voice rising to a crescendo as he said, "Oh, everlasting slaughter." Nowadays, things are no different from prehistoric times, when they bloodied each other's heads with iron bars. It was quite the performance, Luis said. The words set off a spark of revelation as I struggle to understand my prey. I think of the price of fame for a performer. One must corral and direct a revelatory energy. From the crushing terror of the stage, the spotlight that leaves one exposed and vulnerable, an artist must mine this energy for a competence that once achieved is received, applauded, and becomes the most addictive of drugs. Yet the act is separate from the actor. The skill is separate from the skilled. The applause is not love, but mere recognition. This is not connection. There is a deep spiritual appetite in all of us for true connection. Nothing looks like a better cure for being invisible than fame. And yet, fame is the great invisibility cloak, a mask more isolating than a veil of solitude, for it expunges the person altogether, elevating their vocation, and placing all value in the performance of their craft. The person behind the act starves and is strangled and becomes a slave to their role. I think of how similar This is to my mother's spells of dementia and the forgetfulness brought on by Alzheimer's. In between those shining moments for her when she has clarity of thought, in between those turns upon the stage, both die and fade into oblivion. Returning from my daydreams, I ask, did anyone have any reason to wish him harm? Just Rach Egeman, a little worm of a man. That is what we called him. Irm the Worm, ever since he played some slithering stock character named Ermin. Name just stuck. Anyway, Rach was next in line for the male lead on one show after another, and he couldn't get anywhere with his career with Deerl in his way. He had the acting chops, but he wasn't a star. He was short, unmemorable looking, just average in every way, whereas Deerl was extraordinary all around. It was never a fair contest between the two of them. And you say you saw Rach speaking with someone in the alley during the show? I ask. Why, yes, in fact, we knew her. She was a stage designer, a mystic gypsy from the outskirts named Emile Scioli. A real loner, if there ever was one. She was a sharp-featured woman of about 70, thin as a bird, with a long pea coat. Always wore a blue amethyst Hamza on her neck. She was smoking a Marlboro cigarette impatiently, Luis recalls. Did you overhear what they said? I ask. Yes. Did you bring what I asked? She said, stamping her foot against the bitter cold. Then he responded, I have it. That was it. And then he rushed back inside with something in his hand. So what happened next? I asked. At some point, toward the end of the play, Deerl collapsed. When he came to, he was like a man possessed. He began pacing the stage, and then as he looked out over the audience, he screamed at them as if a wild animal baring its teeth and growling to keep a threat at bay. And do you know what caused this transformation? I ask. No one does, Luis says. Are there any working theories? I inquire. There is a rumor that Aisha was deeply jealous. Apparently, Rach had originally been cast as Pierpont Mahler. It was all settled. The playbill was printed. But then Deerl called the theater director and said he was interested in the part. They couldn't refuse. So Deerl upstaged Rach right when he had his big break. Rach could not forgive it. He went off in long tirades. Some believe that Emile Scioli, the gypsy, was part of a group that worshipped the Croton Duvel, the toad devil. They had tattoos of toads stamped on their eyelids and believed that this deity possessed the ability to erase memory, to turn invisible, and to walk among men as a blind wanderer, spreading the void of loss among the people. Some believe that toads are poor sinners serving a penance of tears and relegated to the dank, dark places and to a life of slime and bugs in order to purge their souls, wandering spirits in an earthly purgatory. the grips and stage hands, who know Rach best, said that he has a pearl toad statue given to him by Emile Scioli that has the words inscribed on it, which say, Bang Tasser Toot. And they say the toad has a golden choker collar on it and is somehow connected to the affliction poor Deeril suffered. They say that Rach guards the toad statue with his life, and if it is ever destroyed, Daryl will be healed. This is very helpful, Louise. That is a lot to digest. I'll be in touch if I have further questions. I tell him, the grim lace has no shadow. It walks below the street lights in the alley, donning a black cloak. Its hands and face are green. Its face has no contour, just a flat canvas, until it dawns the visage of one of its victims as the grim lace slinks through the streets of Frankfurt by the train station. The streets are filled with drunks, prostitutes, and panhandlers. An old man sits with a bottle, huddled in a corner by some trash overflowing from a dumpster. He has rags about his shoulders, but his face is thin and handsome below his rugged, unkempt beard. The grim lace turns his green blank face to the man, who looks at him transfixed, and the grim lace latches on to him. A beam of translucent, opaque jelly forms between them, the bond, and the grim lace slinks in, bends to his knee, and draws out the man's visage, the man's memories, and shrinks within his robes to the height of his victim. Renewed, he stands to his feet, like a performer taking on a new role, and gains comfort in his own skin, lets the memories inhabit him, and he throws off his cloak, strolling into the square. I receive a call from the detective. He tells me that there has been a beggar who has gone missing. His daughter has come to the precinct to make the report. He tells me that the incident occurred near the train station. I thank him, and I am off with my hunting bag to find the grim lace. The cloaked creature, with the green hue to his skin, is pacing along the entrance to the train station, where the beggar used to set up each morning. In my bag is a mirror, a cattle prod, and a Sig Sauer 45-meter pistol. I find a bank of deep shadows by the corner and observe my mark. The grim lace does not seem to know that it is adorning the persona of another human being. It seems utterly lost in its contrivance, cursed, as Louise had said. It seems to be in agony every bit as much as the woman Greta who came to my clinic the other day. Does this creature sleep? It lets out a blood-curdling chortle. Oh my God! The beggar must have been schizophrenic. The creature is hearing voices. I see the creature begin the painful, agonizing pantomime of a schizoid talking to himself and arguing a rationalization audibly, projecting failures to a second personality or a persecutor. This is one of the most common psychotic breaks, where the mind cannot accept its own failures, and must personify or anthropomorphize its afflictions. If you hadn't told on me, I would have kept my job. You were drunk. It was you. You sneaky FK, you falsely accused me. You went to Lars and made a fuss, and see where I am now. I hope you are proud of yourself. Rat. And you are the one. You. A drunk. An ingrate. A lazy, good-for-nothing piece of La. Shut up. Get away from me. Police. I am being attacked. Ow, stop. Get away. I didn't touch you. No, stop. Get away. Violation. Stop hurting me. Stop talking, you dirty snitch. I watched the Grimlace rummaging back and forth, gesticulating manically, screaming, yelling, and talking to himself in a fierce blame jeopardy that I know from experience can go on for many hours. The paranoid spell of a tortured mind trying to reconcile an unacceptable fate and a cruel, unforgiving world that hands down curses and bruises with indiscriminate malice. I could find him again soon. I could make a quick detour. He would be going on like this for hours, if not days, until he was arrested, which would just land him down at the precinct. Back at the English Theater, I find Rach Egeman's dressing room. He is now playing the part of the lead in every play. He has ascended to the pinnacle of the profession. Ah, my adoring fan. What? Do you want me to sign the playbill? Yes, can I come in? I ask. Here, come sit, he says with glee, but I do not sit. I take out the cattle prod and place it on the carotid artery on his neck, and with a small squeeze, he shrieks and falls to the floor. I begin my search. After a few minutes, I find the toad talisman and stow it in my bag. Back by the train station, Dirrell is still going on and on. I take out my gun and the toad statute. I place the statute on the ground. I fire a single shot, and the talisman shatters into 1,000 pieces. I look over at Dirrell and see his face suddenly return to its natural state. I walk up to him cautiously. I am Hilda, I say. I've been searching for you a long time. Where am I? Dirrell asks. The train station is just down there. What do you remember? I ask. I don't know, Dirrell says. You must be disoriented, I say. It's more than that. I don't even know who I am, Dirrell says. Quite right. But who among us really does? We all wear 1,000 masks and scarcely know where the real person begins and the artifice ends, don't you think? Who are you? Dirrell asks. Let's go back to my clinic and see if we can't get this sorted out, I tell him. As we walk together in the eerie alleys of a lovely Frankfurt night, we pass by the English Theater, and I watch as Dirrell's eyes sparkle with intrigue. What are they playing tonight? Dirrell asks. The courthouse. Almost 8:30 a.m. It was just before court would begin when his dead client, Mr. Black, showed up to talk. Benny knew the consequences for being late, so was short with him. "Why are you here now?" He spoke in a hushed tone to the apparition in front of him, glancing around as the Alameda County courtroom began to fill up. It would ruin his reputation as the best public defender in the county if people thought he spoke to ghosts. Mr. Black's gray suit, the one he used to always wear, appeared now to fit him well. His cuffs were no longer frayed, the holes gone. Benny tasted the bitter shame of his failure with Mr. Black's case as his stomach knotted. "You owe me more." Mr. Black's voice was flat and emotionless, so different from his last day in this courtroom, when the coughs racked his body, his handkerchief filled with blood. Benny's elbows pressed into the table. The air in the courtroom hung thick and stale. His thin fingers nudged the yellow pad, straightening it imperceptibly. He moved his two pens, one black and one red, so that they were even to the pad. "I paid my debt," Benny whispered. "With the last one." Mr. Black's anger roared like a fire, heating up the air around Benny like a blast furnace. The other, past inhabitants of this room, raged, their hate overwhelming him, even with so many clients. Benny prided himself that he cared about everyone, those he had saved from jail time, and those who were put away. Mr. Black was the first one to come back and visit him, though, after dying in prison, professing his innocence with his last breath. For the accused, Benny, king of the pleas, was the PD to get in, Alameda County. Most of his clients walked, or at least avoided jail time. Benny averaged 600 cases each year, however, so had some losses. And Benny felt the pain of everyone, but innocence and guilt have no place in the criminal justice system. And Benny had begun to wonder if his work meant anything. Some of his clients were monsters, and better off behind bars. Benny worked for his clients, but he lived in this city, had to deal with the crime and violence. Should he put his thumb on the scales of justice? Today, his past clients were weighing in, screaming in thunderous rage, frustration, and anger at what happened to them in this cursed room. "I shouldn't be here. It's not my fault," one voice called out. "I'm innocent!" shouted another, then echoed over and over again into a cacophony, overwhelming Benny. Mr. Black's face leaned in to Benny, his voice roaring. "Pay up, or else." Bang, bang, bang. A gavel thundered, echoing off the wood walls around him. Mr. Black left, fading into the crowd, and taking the voices with him. Benny released his breath, trying to focus on where he was and why. "The court is called to order," the judge called out. A pale, gray man with red and piercing eyes His head floated above his black cloak. Benny blinked, looking around as the colors of the room came into focus. A man in an ill-fitting suit slumped next to him, eyes downcast. Fear vibrated in waves off the man. The fingers of his left hand pick at the nails of his right, over and over. The scraping sound like claws on steel bars. He leaned over to Benny. "Mr. Benny, we're going to be okay, right? You're going to save me. I mean, we have the receipt. It proves I wasn't there for the rape. They can't put this one on me." Benny nodded, but didn't turn. The man's high-pitched voice whined like a broken motor, his breath hot. Benny suddenly hated him, loathed him for being here and needing Benny's help. His life depended on Benny doing his job correctly. Did this man even deserve it? Benny peered toward him, just a glance out of the corner of his eye. Lean as a mop handle, he could not keep still, shoulders moving, fingers picking at imaginary flecks on his borrowed suit and the skin of his hands. Benny's lip curled in disgust. He opened the file, the case notes in perfect order, the receipt on top, stamped with proof of this man's location across town at the time of the sexual assault. The man's arm crossed in front of Benny, his skin red and mottled with sores. He pushed the receipt with a scarred finger. "My Monopoly card, get out of jail free." He laughed. "I need to keep that. There are a few other girls they don't know about yet." The man winked. Benny brushed his fingers on the receipt. Manicured fingernails pale over his dark skin, smoothing the wrinkled paper. A loud rushing sound filled Benny's head. They called to him, his clients who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose lives he could not save due to a lack of this kind of solid alibi. He heard them screaming, shouting at the unfairness, the inhumanity. At the district attorney's table across from him, a tall, thin woman stared with shrewd, cold eyes. She turned away to put her head down into a stack of files. Voices cried out from her table too. People wronged and insulted in the worst way. Losing property, their self-respect, or their family, and then forced to sit in this horrible room and go home with nothing but tears and anger. Their voices were loud. "Punish! Vengeance! An eye for an eye!" The screams racked Benny's brain, and he shut his eyes. His hands flew to his temple, pressing in to quiet their cries. Bang, bang, bang. The gavel thundered again. Benny stood, motioning to his client to stand as well. Benny clenched his jaw and knew the answer to his dilemma. Forget what was best for the client or society. Benny needed to look out for himself. This man will be sacrificed to Mr. Black to appease him and the demons chasing Benny. This man was guilty. of course. Maybe not for this crime, but for another, Benny was certain. Benny will change places, go from the defender to the accuser, from the protector to the judge. His fingers moved, just a brief sweep, and the paper receipt floated unseen, down out of the file, into the trash can. Gone. The trial moved fast. A police officer, serious and trustworthy in his pressed blue uniform, pointed at the man next to Benny. That's the guy. Whispers erupted from the courtroom. Bodies shifted on the wooded seats, squeaking with their movements. That man is just evil. I could tell right off. Someone said, the monster should hang for what he did to that girl. Another voice added, bang, bang, bang. Justice thundered down from on high. The verdict is guilty, the judge shouted, a sneer on his face. Next. Benny squeezed his eyes shut as the voices in his head roared out, echoing, guilty, guilty. The bailiff pulled on the man next to him. No, I'm innocent, he screamed. Mr. Benny, what happened? Mr. Black appeared in front of Benny, nodding before he left, with the man to his future hell. Then the voices were gone, the sudden silence deafening. Benny picked up his red pen to carefully put a small X to the end of the line of thousands of black and red marks, then lifted the next file off the foot-high stack next to him. Justice will be done. The barber's pole. Oscar sits in his barber's chair, reading the Trentonian on his iPhone, cataloging the day's stories for the early rush. Oscar pays special attention to the stock charts and the upcoming highway projects. People love to talk about making money and to complain about traffic. The bell rings and Michael walks in. He is a tall, well put together trader type in his early 30s, wearing a crisp white button-down and expensive men's Oxford shoes. Oscar yells, Maria! Maria! Customer! Get in here, I need a wash. Oscar packs the espresso filter basket with Stumptown hair bender, espresso grinds, and tamps down the shot of brown powder. He purges the group head with a quick shot of steam, then locks the filter into the espresso machine and starts brewing. The dark, black espresso drips like droplets of dark, black blood. Drip, drip, drip. Then the platelets of the steamy brew ruffle out the lighter oils and gases, lathering them into a milky brown crema in the top of the white espresso cup. It looks like coagulating blood congealing around the white skin of a fresh wound. The association with blood unsettles Oscar. The thought of fresh red blood, thick and full, like pomegranate juice. The irresistible impulse to cut. His mind stirs with perverse thoughts that he cannot silence, even though it is before 9 o'clock a.m. The Oscar pours 2 shots of minty Sambuca Romana alongside the espressos. Something to take the edge off. Hair of the dog that bit ya, Oscar says, thinking of bite marks on an arm and the serrated cuts of the canine teeth drawing out syrupy red nectar. Here, sit down, and let's get you a wash. Oscar ushers Michael over to Maria's washing station and down into the sliding chair that leans back over the sink and pushes his head back over the neck rest. Oscar takes his shot and feels a gnawing in his stomach at the thought of blood, an unfathomable craving to drain life from the veins. Maria has inky black hair, still wet from her own morning shower. The fresh, earthy shampoo scents of lavender and mint waft off of her. She also has a hint of a touch of perfume, maybe a Chanel, tantalizing with a musky base and notes of fresh, dense jasmine and the acidic afterbite of citrus. She is college age, but too young to drink legally. Fresh and pure, with clean blue eyes and smooth skin. She speaks in a sing-song way, softly, like a hushed breath. Here, close your eyes. Here, is it too warm? Now, relax your shoulders. Almost done. Oscar is making a trade on his dual trading screens in the corner to distract himself from his bloodlust while he waits for Michael's wash to be finished. Maria places Michael's head back under the mobile shower head, pours water over his forehead, and smooths the baby fine threads of silky blonde hair back with her soft hands and delicate, ringed fingers. Michael feels the warmth of her palm and the cold of her rings under the rushing water. Maria applies the shampoo and works it through his blonde, straight hair, massaging his forehead and pulling the lather and water back all the way down past his ears to his neck. Then she sits him up and begins toweling him off. Ready? Oscar says. He hands Michael his shot of liqueur, which he abruptly drinks, and then sits down in Oscar's chair and dons the barber's apron. What'll it be? The usual? As Michael nods, Oscar methodically cleans his Wall Pro Series clippers. He uses a brush to clear the blades and carriage, then sprays some sanitizing disinfectant, twice facing up, once facing down. He applies 3 or 4 drops of oil to the toe and heel of the blade. He runs the clipper, then wipes them down, and begins methodically fading the hair with different length settings to accomplish a clean skin fade. As Oscar cuts and the two men talk, Oscar notices a small skin lesion, a brown mark by the earlobe. It glistens in the fluorescent overhead lighting. It's been rough, Michael says. Hey, what do you think of this P&G stock? Oscar asks. I'm depressed, Oscar. I feel useless. I don't make any good decisions these days. I don't think you should take my advice on anything. The smell of barbasol is stirred up and invades the nose. A smell of oak moss, coumarin, and clove, intrusive as old eggs. She left him a note. Dinner is on the table. I was tired, Oscar explains, trying to let Michael know that while it sucks to be out of work, it is a good time to reflect. After all, It is sometimes work that gets in the way of relationships. There is nothing like your own flesh and blood to drive you to madness. Now, it is time for the shave with the straight razor. Oscar reaches over his shoulders and unbuttons the top 2 buttons. He then takes a paper towel and places it over the back collar of the shirt. Oscar unbuttons the cape and drapes it loosely over the shoulders. He pulls out a fresh linen towel and lays it over Michael's right shoulder. He then grabs a hot towel from the towel warmer with a set of tongs and pats it on the chin, mouth, upper lip, and cheeks, while Michael leans his head back and enjoys the steam of the towel laid now over his forehead and eyes. Oscar uses a small brush to foam the hot lather in a cup. "You have a little growth I haven't seen before," Oscar says. "Oh yeah," Michael says. "Here, take a look," Oscar says, showing him the mirror and where the little brown bump peeks out from the mounds of shaving foam. "Huh, guess I do," Michael says. "After your shave, you want me to lance it off?" Oscar asks, hopefully. "Yeah, guess so," Michael says reflexively. Oscar licks his lips, purses them, nods his head up and down, and feels the adrenaline of the thought of blood rise to his forehead. What a rush. Oscar takes the straight razor off the shelf. He takes a fresh blade from the paper wrapping and places it in the stabilizers by the shoulder of the blade. Oscar applies the hot lather and begins pulling the blade along the skin. The sound is close to Michael's ears and sounds like paper ripping, or like the sound of a rake on the sand. He keeps his eyes closed as Oscar finishes the shave. All the while, Oscar's heart is beating quickly, and his eyes are dilated and buggy in the mirror. A droplet of sweat forms on his brow, just a small nick in the right spot. No. He mustn't think of it. He already has his treat. "You ready?" Oscar says. "No time like the present," Michael tells him. Then Oscar applies pressure, and the blade slips into the skin, just below the imperfection. The slightest circular wince and a pull back out from the cut. As Oscar withdraws the blade and the lesion in one stroke, fresh, syrupy blood pools. The drip of blood. The whooshing sound of the blood flowing through the veins. The gurgle of coagulating blood, clotting and sealing the wound. Oscar feels giddy. There are goosebumps on the back of his neck, and he feels a jolt of adrenaline throughout his whole body. Oscar takes a styptic pencil to bind the wound. The saliva pools on the back of his tongue, looking at the juicy red drops. In a moment, the wound is treated, and all is well. "See you in 2 weeks," Oscar says. Michael hands him a tip, pats his shoulder, and heads out into the bright midday sun. All afternoon, Oscar paces back and forth, turning the chair over with customer after customer. But the call of the blood is like a voice in his head. The dark impulses well up from an unknown source. Try as he might, Oscar can't put it out of his mind. Oscar knows that in medieval times, the barber's pole was a sign of the bloodletting that old-time barber surgeons would perform in their shops. The poles are blue for the veins revealed under a tourniquet, and red for the flowing blood. It was thought that draining one's blood into a metal dish would extract bad humors that caused disease. Barbers also performed amputations, pulled and cleaned teeth, set bones, and even delivered babies. But Oscar could not get the thought of blood out of his head. E.B. had gone down to Two Brothers Pizza and brought back an Italian sub that smelled like wet feet and oil. As he ate it in giant bites, Oscar thought of the gush of blood a bite into human flesh would make. Maria skipped over and plopped down in Oscar's chair. "You want me to scrape clean all the baby hairs on the back of your neck?" Oscar asks Maria. "If it isn't too much trouble," she whispers. Oscar gets his blade ready and pulls up Maria's hair into a high bun, carefully making sure to get all of it held up in the air. Oscar applies the hot foam lather. He begins scraping clean the neckline, but he can see and feel the arteries and veins drawing up her neck. The sound of the blood vessels, the blue rivers running just below the surface, the smell of her Chanel perfume, the moist, young, supple skin. Oscar cannot resist the perverse longing for blood. He is disgusted with himself, ashamed. But the cut is everything. "Almost done," Oscar says, tensing the blade in his hand and looking for his mark. "Thank you so much," Maria says. But Oscar chooses his spot and dips the blade into the willowy flesh. A gush of blood spurts. A gusher. It spurts in a few plops, like a garden hose with your thumb over the nozzle, then drips down onto the rim of her white crew neck shirt, pooling out into the linen fibers. "Ow!" she yells. "Did you cut me?" "Just a little nick. That's all," Oscar says. But his heart is racing, and his hands are shaking from the excitement. He tends to her wound quickly, efficiently, and professionally, with great care. But Maria is not having it. "I'm out of here, Pops. Until I get this looked at. Thanks a lot." "Thanks for nothing," Maria says as she stomps out. But she will be back. Oscar smiles and pours himself some Sambuca Romana. "E.B.," he says, "isn't it just the darndest thing how satisfying it is to make a clean cut?" The fat apprentice barber looks up in shock, red onion and ham hanging out of his mouth, and attempts a smile, totally at a loss for what his boss is talking about. Oscar searches online for a proper bleeding bowl. Obviously, there is no such thing on Amazon. So, Oscar chooses an elegant stainless steel reserve bowl. At $43, it is a luxury purchase. Next, Oscar has to get his hands on a fleam. This is the best way to do bloodletting. It is clean and precise and quick, unless you tap the blade too hard and sever an artery. One would be surprised how fast a femoral artery bleeds out. Oscar purchases some tourniquets and various medical supplies. What will someone think if they find out what he is up to? A few days have passed, and Oscar's order has arrived. And this is Oscar's chance. Marjorie sits in Oscar's chair. She is in her 70s. A large black woman who wears gorgeous dresses and maintains the vanity of a much younger woman. She has great, dyed black hair that falls in waves. The fat of her lips and jowls is all in the right places to make for an inviting face that warms and endears. Found a spot on my liver. Maybe that is what is giving me all these liver spots and spider veins, she says. Maybe, Oscar says with a knowing grin. What's that look for? She asks. Nothing. It's just that they used to have a way to purify the liver. Back a long, long time ago, in medieval times. Purify the liver. Oh, yes, please. I could use some of that, Marjorie says. It's a little gothic, if you know what I mean. It involves a cut in the arm and draining your blood, Oscar says, as matter-of-factly as he can. Are you missing a screw? She says. I didn't think you'd be interested. It's only for people who are really serious about maintaining a youthful look, Oscar says. Evil humors. Heavens to Betsy. What will they think of next? She asks. Like I said, not for you. I already knew when I brought it up. But I have had some who've had miraculous results, Oscar said. Now, these results, it can clear up the skin, she asks. You would never believe me if I told you. Takes off 10 years, Oscar says. More than that, if you cut too deep, I'd imagine, Marjorie says. Well, we are all finished with your cut, so if there's nothing, I'll do it, Marjorie says. What, really? Oscar asks. Of course. 10 years, I have to see for myself, Marjorie says. Oscar fastens the tourniquet below her bicep. The veins under her black skin come forward. Deep blue rivers. Oscar begins to sweat, and his hands grow damp. 1 second, he yells, rushing to the back room for his bleeding bowl and fleam. In seconds, he emerges with the utensils. Marjorie is singing, Did-da-dum, did-da-dum. Are you washed in the blood? In the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? As she hums and sings, Oscar sharpens the blade of the fleam. He places the bleeding bowl on the floor below her left arm. Are you ready, Marjorie? Oscar asks in hushed tones. Are you ready? Let's get it over with already, she says. Oscar places the fleam and its triangular blade just over the blood vessel on her left arm. It will just sting a bit, Oscar says, swinging his fist and digging the fleam deep into her arm. Oh dear, Marjorie says. I already feel a bit lightheaded. Oscar sees the trickle of blood run down the arm, to the fingers, and the drip, 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 drip into the bowl. He grabs her bicep with pumping squeezes and says, "More like this, Marge. This is better." "Stop, Oscar. You are hurting me," Marjorie says. "Just a little more, and it'll run good," Oscar says, with faraway eyes, glazed over in a helical madness. "I'm losing too much blood," Marjoire cries. "I'm going to bleed out." But Oscar cleans the wound with alcohol, does a quick butterfly stitch to seal the vein and the wound, and makes quick work with the bandages. Marjorie is ghastly pale. She gets up. She is trembling. She drops some money on the floor and turns and walks out in a trance. I won't be seeing her again, Oscar thinks, as the little bell sounds. And she leaves. In the back of the shop, with the blood bowl in hand, engorged in endorphins, Oscar observes the blood, sniffs it, puts in a finger, swirls it around, and indulges in a little taste. It tastes like steak. It tastes great. E.B. comes back from running errands and storms right up to Oscar when he walks in. "Boss, I got a call from Marjorie Jones on my way back over," E.B. says. "Did you get the inspection stickers?" Oscar says, referring to a little side business they have selling fake inspection stickers that are supposedly from the DMV. "Boss, that woman nearly died," E.B. says. "She was having skin problems, E.B. She was looking old. She proceeded at her own risk," Oscar says. "Oh yeah? You have a lawyer sort that one out?" E.B. asks. "It's nothing out of the ordinary," Oscar says. "Barbers have been doing it for hundreds of years. If you ever do anything like this again, I'm done. That's it," E.B. says. "The blood. It is the most extraordinary thing. Dark and also light, substantial, but also fluid." "Are you losing it, Oscar? Are you literally going crazy?" E.B. asks. "You know the feeling when you give someone a perfect cut?" Oscar asks, and continues. "It is the same feeling. Exactly the same." "Whatever, boss," E.B. says, sitting down and stress-eating his second hoagie of the day. Oscar walks back into the back of the shop and sees the old hand-drawn sign in the corner. Oscar's Unisex Cuts, 8 to 8 MS. Oscar goes into the refrigerator and stirs his fingers in the blood, then puts his whole palm in. Then he takes a fresh, hot towel and submerges it in the bloody liquid. He pulls it out and finds the white barber's pole that he bought from the specialty shop. He wraps the towel helically around the pole. It is a helical swirl of red and white, the red splatter of real blood. He puts the plastic covering over it, walking past E.B., eating his sub. Oscar goes outside and stands by the storefront. He takes a hammer and starts installing his new barber's pole. He stands back, hands on hips, admiring his work. His eyes are bloodshot from the adrenaline, and his lips are red from the blood. Am I living in a haunted house? I lay in bed reading a horror book when I see movement from the corner of my eye coming from the other side of the closed curtain. I slowly lower my book my mind screaming at me not to. There is a shadow floating on the right side of my window. At first, I thought it was the shadow of the flag, flapping in the wind, but quickly realized this is no flag. I stare at the shadow as it moves up, then to the left, then down, then to the right, before repeating the cycle again. What the heck is it? I mutter. The shadow changes shape repeatedly until it stops, and now resembles the head of a dragon. At first, my curiosity peaks, but then an unexplainable fear overtakes my senses, and I am on the verge of leaping out of bed. Whatever is distracting me does not bring peace my way, but a terror that will affect my lifetime. I thank God the curtain remains closed, for I do not care to see what is producing that shadow, for I had a feeling it will cause my sanity to leave me. Yet there seems to be an unknown force pulling me to the curtains. The shadow floats by my window for eternity, haunting me. I cannot pull my eyes from this shadow. Thankfully, it eventually dissipates, and I can relax. A weight lifts from my body, and the fear dissipates. I get up from the bed, wondering if I should go over to the window and throw open the curtains or exit the room. Restroom break, I say to myself as I open the door and walk down the hallway to the bathroom. This is the first eerie episode I had encountered in this house I recently occupied. A one-story home with a garage, living room, dining room, kitchen, laundry room, 3 bedrooms, and 1.5 bathrooms. No talk of evil spirits by the past owners, but would they honestly say such to me? For they did not look like such fools. They were the first occupants when the house came into existence, and all went well for them. That is what they say to the ignorant future owner. For the next week, I did my best to explain the bizarre episode. At first, a floating balloon entangled by the pole of the flag. But I never saw a balloon changing shapes by itself. My imagination tends to run wild, especially when I am reading a book. Could this be my imagination at work? I purchased a couple of small dogs to keep me company not long after. Not intimidating to the human world, but hopefully toward the ones from the beyond. It made me feel much better to have another living being in my house. A month went by when the next episode took place in my house. "Get out of there!" I call out to Bingo, the mischievous one, who is trying to get into the fireplace, for I have thrown the covering to the bacon into the place. As I went back to the recliner, I thought I heard a noise come from the back door. I stop in my tracks and listen for a time, but only hear Bingo moving about. I look around, not seeing Ringo, so possibly him. The dog's food and water dish are in the laundry room, close to the back door, so very will possible, so thought nothing of the matter as I go over to sit, and back to the book on the Crusades. Not long after I started reading, I heard the noise again. It sounded like something tapping on the door, then tapping the floor, then back to tapping the door. I sat there for about a minute, listening to the episode. "Ringo!" I called out. The tapping stopped. What is that dog doing? I get ready to walk around the corner and into the kitchen to the laundry room, when I hear a distinct sound that stops me in my tracks. The sounds of a heavy boot walking from the laundry room toward where I am. I look around, trying to find something to use as a weapon. I see the small baseball bat lying next to the chair. I quickly grabbed the bat as the steps came closer. I raise it up, ready for the intruder to come around the corner. If the intruder has a gun, my life will end. But I will get in a good swing or two, I hope. I continue to wait as the footsteps cross the kitchen floor, but seems to be taking too long to appear in front of me. I stand there, not sure what to do. The steps stop, and the anxiety goes up. For is the intruder going to appear, or do I go to it? I ponder if I should call out, but it would more than likely come out as a squeak, so kept my mouth shut. Perspiration covers my body as fear grips me. I stand for who knows how long, trying to decide what to do. Decision abruptly comes forth as I step forward toward the kitchen, with the bat raised to swing. I near the entrance to the kitchen, wondering if I should jump out or peek around the corner. Just get it over with, I thought. I leaped out, prepared to swing, but there was no one there. Instead, Ringo looked up at me. I looked toward the laundry room, seeing no movement. "There is no way you could have made those sounds," I said to Ringo. Ringo walked past me into the living room, leaving me to confront the intruder. I meandered through the kitchen toward the laundry room, preparing for the intruder to leap out. But when I entered the laundry room, there was no one there. I checked the doorknob, locked. What could have created those noises? I muttered. There was only one other place I had not checked out, and that was past the laundry room and into the bathroom. The room only had a sink and a toilet, so there was no space for the perpetrator to hide. I walked to the bathroom, seeing no one in the room. I went over to the window and saw it latched shut. "Nothing," I said. I turned around and was about to leave the bathroom when I heard the footsteps again. They started on the other side of the kitchen, coming toward me, but my eyesight saw nothing. I grabbed the doorknob and slammed the door shut as the steps entered the laundry room. I quickly locked the door as the steps came up to the door and stopped. I had the bat raised, ready for whatever tried to break in. If I still had my sanity, I would realize the bat would do nothing to my invisible terror. What am I experiencing? I thought. Too much horror I'm taking in that is bringing madness upon me. I am not a believer in ghosts, but is this what I am encountering? Am I living in a haunted house? I mutter. As I mutter the words, I hear the tapping on the floor, then on the back door, then back to the floor. This went on for a time before it stopped. Then the footsteps started up again, heading to the other end of the kitchen, ending. I slowly opened the door, seeing there was no one around. I need to get out of this area. I rushed toward the living room, at one moment feeling quite cold, but soon I was in the living room by the fireplace. Both dogs lay on the couch, looking at me. "What is your problem?" I can imagine them saying. I went over to the coffee table and grabbed the remote control, put on some sound, and hopefully that will calm me down. I turned on the television and turned up the volume. I did not want to hear the footsteps and the tapping. Part of me wanted to leave the house, to never return. The other half, thinking whatever was creating the noise was not causing me any harm, just freaking me out, I muttered. But not freaking my dogs out. I sat down in my chair, with the bat nearby, knowing the bat was useless against a ghost. But it was reassuring to have it near me. Anyway, the rest of the night, I sat in the chair watching the tube, then dozed off to wake up an hour later, wondering if the ghost was still around. There is no way I'm going in that kitchen. I eventually dozed off again, waking up off and on throughout the night. My day at work was miserable due to lack of sleep. I spent the entire time contemplating on what I should do. I could move out, but then I would end up losing much money and wind up in an apartment, which I do not want to do. I could go to a church and have a priest bless the house. I could have a psychic or ghost hunter come in, or just live with it and get over my fears. If harm did not come my way, then I should be okay. But what about my sanity? It could make it an interesting home life, I muttered. My life was dull overall, so the reason I read so much of the fantastical. Living this kind of life in my house might be interesting. Of course, part of me screaming I was insane to have such thoughts. It came to me living at the house, encountering footsteps once a month, and little odd things happening. At first, scared, but eventually I became numb. Soon, I was like my dogs, and just enjoyed the roof over my head, no matter how bizarre it was to live under it. Black Book. What is the value of a human life? Henry often wondered this himself. Sometimes it was all he thought about. A person is born, goes to school, gets into a career, and maybe even settles down and has a family. So many factors go into someone's life that it is hard to quantify each variable. Yet, Henry constantly tried to answer the question, and that's why you need to sort the shelves the way the company trained you. Do you understand, Henry? Henry blinked as his manager's words brought him back to reality. He turned to face the red-faced man. "Sure thing, I'll get right on it." Apparently unsatisfied with his response, the sniff-necked manager left the aisle with a huff. He didn't know what the manager was upset about this time, but that was his usual response when his boss was angry. Henry felt relieved when he was left alone. The store initially hired him as a cashier. He tried to do his best, but his people skills were subpar. His boss didn't take long to give Henry a new position. Now, he was in charge of stocking and sorting the shelves. It was a peaceful job, except when customers asked him where certain products were. If he had to listen to another customer asking him where the sour cream was again, Henry shook his head at the thought. That was one of the things about people that bugged him. They never even seemed to attempt to look for stuff themselves. It seemed they thought their time was more valuable than his own. During his first few days of employment, the other staff would ask him many questions. Hey, how's it going? Did you catch the game last night? Why do you just stare off into space sometimes? Henry would always answer their questions the same way. I can't talk right now. They seemed to catch on that he didn't want to speak to them. His mind had more important subjects to think about. He only took this job because Henry thought he could think about life from a different perspective. His real work had been stalling for some time now. Henry just felt like he needed some inspiration to propel him forward. That was what he hoped to achieve working at a grocery store. So far, all he had achieved was to get a piercing headache anytime he spoke to anyone. As he stocked the shelves, trying to remember how they had trained him, he yearned for something society said was wrong. He checked his wristwatch and saw it was 4:45 p.m., almost halfway done. Soon, Henry could pursue his real passion. Time went by in a blur for Henry. It was 5, then 6, then 7. And before he knew it, it was almost time for him to leave. He looked at the shelves and saw they were all in perfect order. All that would be left for him to do now was clock out and walk out the front door. Most people would then get into their cars and drive home to their families. Henry had no family, at least none that were still alive. That thought used to pain him when he was a kid, but thinking about it now, he felt nothing. He had gotten used to living alone. Besides, since he was alone, no one could disturb his work. Henry had been watching one of his co-workers for the past few weeks, a bright and full-of-life young female who would be attending a well-known college in the spring. If overheard gossip was to be believed, she had a promising future. She was, however, known to be promiscuous. Everyone at work knew about it, and every time her boyfriend would come to pick her up, Henry could feel the tension in the air. Some guys she had been intimate with even worked at the grocery store. Many of their co-workers would show disgust with the woman, but Henry didn't have an opinion. He was more curious about it than anything. A woman who seemingly has a perfect life does something consistently to jeopardize everything. It fascinates him. That was why tonight he was not going to be going straight home. Henry already had everything planned in his mind. He just needed to wait. And patience was one of his strong suits, if nothing else. Henry walked to the back of the building and observed the woman, Ashley. She was going about her usual end-of-shift routine, seemingly without care. Once Henry had clocked out, he pretended to be doing some paperwork. Essentially, he was just stalling for time until Ashley was finished talking to the other employees. As the minutes passed, Henry wondered what she could be talking about for so long. That was another thing that Henry had trouble understanding. Small talk. What was the point of talking about subjects both sides knew the answers to, but pretended they didn't? It utterly baffled him. This was why his work was so necessary. Soon, 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 I will have another piece to the puzzle. I know I am so close to understanding, so close to knowing what makes a person a person. I just need more experiments, more time. Finally, he saw a woman with 2 blonde pigtails and wearing her uniform with modifications, revealing more of her body than was appropriate. Looking at her, even Henry could see why all the guys went for her. She was fit, perky, and seemed to be, on the outside, a ray of positive energy. However, he wasn't interested in any of that, because his interest in her came from a different place. Okay, see you guys later. Ashley said this, and waved goodbye to everyone she had been talking to. They waved at her and said an unsynchronized goodbye. After moments, Henry got up and put away the papers he had been pretending to read. He saw that no one was watching and left out the back door. His car was parked in the parking lot, and he got inside. Ashley was still in clear view as she walked down the sidewalk. With a turn of his key, his car came to life. Henry knew the exact path she would take to get home. The key to any good plan is careful calculations, after all. He went the opposite way, instead of driving behind her and potentially being seen by a coworker. From his planning, he knew there was a spot where he could park his car and wait for her to walk by. Then, he would say he was having car trouble and ask to use her phone. As he drove to the spot, his lips moved upward into a smile. During his actual work was the only time he felt any real emotions. For the time being, he couldn't help the smile on his face, nor did he want to. However, once it was time to begin, he would be stoic and show nothing. The spot was empty, as Henry knew it would be. He carefully drove the car in and shut off the engine. Now, there was some time before she would arrive. It was perfect, allowing him to start the entry in his black book. Henry opened his glove box and felt around for it. His fingers touched a firm edge, and the black book's distinctive leather texture. The answers to Henry's questions were within its pages, and it was his life's work. He felt like she could be the one to fit all the pieces together. Sighing as he opened the book, he knew he had thought those exact thoughts before. No, she is different. I am confident she is the one. My work is almost complete. Then I can rest. Yes, relax and enjoy life. Enjoy? What does that mean? Have I ever enjoyed anything? Yes, my work brings me joy. Henry violently shook his head in an attempt to clear his thoughts. He checked his wristwatch and knew Ashley should be passing by any minute now. The car door creaked as Henry opened it, and the ground beneath his feet made a crunching noise as he exited the car. His senses were always heightened as when he was working. Then he heard the distinctive sound of approaching footsteps. I know, right? You won't believe what she said to me after that. Her voice echoed through the night sky, and the words' high-pitched tone hurt Henry's head. He popped the hood of the car and grabbed his work bag. Pulling a rag out of it and dousing it in a potent knockout agent, he felt calm. Henry hid the rag in his pocket and bent over the engine, pretending to examine it. When Ashley saw Henry, she jumped at first. Then she saw who it was and seemed only to get more startled. Henry pretended not to notice her for a moment. Using his best acting skills, he looked up at her and put a surprised look on his face. Oh, hey, Ashley. Yeah, my car just sort of crapped out. I've been trying to see what's wrong with it, but I might be out of my league here. He could see her hesitate, and Henry thought she might just turn and run. Maybe her survival instincts were telling her to flee for her life. Ultimately, she seemed to take a breath and compose herself. Did you need any help? You would help me? A strange man in a dark alley? She chuckled at that, and that confused Henry. He genuinely asked her that question, and she thought he was joking. Was it because they worked together, leading her to believe she knew him somehow? In the end, Henry didn't know. Do you need help or not? I got to meet up with someone soon. Of course, that would be great. Thank you. Can you just hold a light over here so I can see the engine better? Sure. She opened her phone and turned on its flashlight. Ashley approached the car's hood and held the light high to expose the engine. Let me just grab a wrench. 1 second. Henry went around to the back of the car and pulled the rag out of his pocket. That was when it happened, and it didn't surprise Henry. His vision started to turn red, and his head began to tremble. His ears began to ring, and he had to hold on to the car as dizziness suddenly overtook him. The symptoms only got worse and worse until he blacked out. When he came to, he was sitting in the front seat of his car, with his black book in hand. He sifted through the book, remembering where he got it. It was at a yard sale, of all places, where he first saw the black book. The book seemed to call to him with its ornately designed cover. Immediately, he went over and picked it up. He remembered thinking that this book was what he had been missing his whole life. Henry gave the owner whatever insignificant amount of money they had wanted and left. That was the day his life had truly begun. Now he had a passion for his work, his genuine work. Focusing on the present moment, he opened the book and read its most recent entry, Participant 264. Name: Ashley. Perky, attractive, promiscuous, naive, trusting, deceitful, social. Performed fingernail removal on both hands. She screamed in agony for several minutes, surprisingly. Then, she became silent. After a few minutes of silence, I proceeded with a finger removal. This elicited intense emotions from the participant, which went on for several minutes. After I removed all the fingers and the screaming and pleading stopped, more work was required. Starting from the wrist, I cut the skin and peeled it back all the way to the elbow. I took great care to ensure the patient didn't black out from blood loss. The results of the experiments had to be seen on the patient's face. This continued until there was no more skin on both her arms. At this point, the participant was slipping in and out of consciousness, and I knew it was time to end the experiment. I used an axe I bought from a camping store, and placing her head against the floor, decapitated her in 2 swings. It would have been 1 swing, but I lost my footing. It was very unprofessional, and I will take care to prevent this in the future. In conclusion, Ashley was an interesting subject, but not the one. She would not be the one to answer my questions. More experiments to follow. Henry sighed after he finished reading. He closed the book and put it back in his glove box. Looks like the book didn't find what it was looking for. When Henry tried to remember his life before the black book, he couldn't. If he tried to recall the memories, a great pain would follow. That doesn't matter to me anymore. I am not that person anymore. Move on. Wait a second. Maybe what I need is a fresh start. Just me and my book together. Yes, a new name and a new life. This town is getting old, and inspiration is lacking. Yes, yes, yes. He shook his head until the thoughts stopped, then rubbed his eyes. Henry checked his wristwatch and saw it was almost 6 a.m. They would soon be looking for participant 264, and the idea made Henry chuckle. There was no way they would ever find her. He had made sure of that. That didn't matter to him, though. He needed to look toward the future, for he was one step closer to knowing the value of a person's life. My brain through your brain. Was an optimist, and so, naturally, was the thing that lived in her brain. She awoke one Tuesday morning to discover the change. At first, it was merely a mental echo, barely perceptible. Two indistinguishable minds, one off by a fraction of a second. For Katie's every thought, there was an echo, trailing just behind. Over the day, the new brain drifted further out of sync, and soon she could hear its thoughts, almost identical to hers, but distinct. Eventually, they started talking. "Who are you?" Katie asked. "Katie Singleton," the voice said from inside her head. "That's me." "You're new in there." "I guess so," the voice said. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry." Katie was an over-apologizer, too. "What should I call you?" "It's hard to get past Katie," the voice said. "How about Princess Penelope?" Katie asked. It was the name she'd given her imaginary friend when she was an 8-year-old princess junkie. Princess Penelope had filled a void. Playmate, partner in mischief. The sister she never had. The voice was as thrilled as Katie was. It remembered the same childhood. "I love it," she said. "I feel so fabulous. I'm Princess Penelope." Katie wondered what her therapist would have to say about all this, but decided to just go with it. It was nice to have someone like-minded to talk to. They quizzed each other as Katie waited for the morning train, phone held to her ear so onlookers would think there was a real person on the other end of the conversation. "Favorite color?" Princess Penelope asked. "Turquoise," they said together. "Turquoise. Movie?" Katie asked. "Eternal Sunshine," they replied simultaneously. Eternal Sunshine. Guilty pleasure food? Rocky Road, Katie said, as Princess Penelope replied, "Raw meat." Katie paused, puzzled. It was the first discordant note of their friendship. The train arrived, and they got on. Together, of course. "You seem distant," Noah said. It was Sunday morning. They were burrowed under covers, hiding from the daylight. "Just like eternal sunshine," Princess Penelope noted. Katie had thought the same thing. She smiled. It was like having a sister, a twin. Noah waited for a response. "See?" he said. "You're somewhere else." Katie had felt disconnected from Noah well before the appearance of her invisible friend. Their relationship was stagnant, all unhealthy patterns. She pretended to laugh at his jokes. He feigned interest in her plans. "So, what is it?" He seemed more annoyed than concerned. When she moved to the city to be with him, everyone said that she was moving too fast, that it was a bad idea. In time, Katie realized that they were right. She and Noah didn't really know each other, didn't even like each other. "Did you meet someone?" She traced the line of his jaw with her index finger. Gently. "Can't we just be quiet together?" she asked. Noah sighed, but pulled her close anyway. I'd love for us to tell him, Princess Penelope said. But he'd never understand. At the market for dish soap, Katie became distracted by the meat aisle. She settled on a pound of ground chuck. Leanest she could find, 98% fat-free. It made her feel less guilty about the purchase. "It's okay," said Princess Penelope. "You know, pregnant women also crave protein." Katie didn't see the relevance, but didn't argue. The woman at checkout eyed her suspiciously. Katie wondered if there was something in their demeanor that called attention to them. "Are our eyes twitching?" Katie asked Princess Penelope aloud. "Excuse me?" the woman behind the counter responded. Katie quickly took her bag and went to the alley out back. By the dumpsters, she tore through the plastic wrap and pulled out handfuls of ground beef, squished it between her hands, into her mouth. Her teeth released saturated blood from spongy tissue to drip down her throat. Princess Penelope almost cried inside her, and Katie felt sustained in a way that was new to her, supercharged. Oh, God. She buried her face in the package of meat, gobbling like a starved mutt, sucking down every stray drop of juice until her tongue lapped against the styrofoam backing. "Oh, God. What are you?" Katie asked. Noah slept in the bedroom. They'd barely spoken that evening. When she came in from work, he told her she looked sick. It was true. She'd examined herself in the bathroom mirror, cheeks hollowed from lost weight, bags under her eyes, dark as bruises, thinning hair, chapped lips, sores. Still, his words hurt her feelings. Princess Penelope's, too. Now Katie sat on the couch, streaming shows she'd already seen. A shield of noise so Noah wouldn't hear her talking. "I don't know," Princess Penelope answered. "A figment of my imagination? Some part of my brain? I don't think so," Princess Penelope said. "I exist. I'm not a stray thought, or a ghost, or anything like that. But what do you look like? I can't tell. I only see my brain. Through your brain, if that makes sense." "It does," Katie said. "I think there's something you saw, or maybe read. A clue. I'm going to look." Princess Penelope could find memories Katie had lost. It was a wonderful secret shared between them. Her internal friend could call up, with perfect clarity, forgotten birthday parties, replay, word for word, conversations with friends who'd moved away, recover romantic feelings for Noah from those blissful first months when he'd been her lifeline in an unfriendly new city, rescue her mother's smile when she'd been happy, her father's when he'd been alive. "Let me know if you figure it out," Katie said. Princess Penelope went quiet while she searched, and Katie felt lonelier than ever. Shows replayed in front of her, and she didn't bother clicking yes when the "still watching" prompt appeared. She fell asleep sitting up. No transition. Her brain just clicked off like a light. Wake up, Princess Penelope said. Katie opened her eyes. She stood in the bedroom, facing a wall. What's going on? She asked. Don't be mad, Princess Penelope said. What happened? Katie willed herself to turn from the wall and realized that she couldn't. Princess Penelope was in control. I won't be mad, Katie said. Just show me. In a minute, Princess Penelope said through their mouth. Now she was the one using it. I realized what it was. You saw a video in high school, science class. The zombie wasp. It played in their head. National Geographic. Wasp larvae take over a caterpillar while feeding on it from the inside, directing it to gorge itself until they're ready to eat their way out. You're a wasp? Katie asked. Something smaller, I think, Princess Penelope said. But the same idea. Some kind of bug, maybe. A bug? Crawling around inside her skull. It was too unsettling. Like an itch you could never hope to scratch. I know, said Princess Penelope. It's icky. Again, Katie tried to turn her head. Nothing. The muscles of her body were completely disconnected from her thoughts. Show me what happened, Katie pleaded. Their head tilted down, and Katie saw their hands, covered to elbows in blood. The rest of it. Please. They turned from the wall, and Katie saw it. Bedspread spattered red. Hammer slathered in gristle. Flesh and bone chips. Tools. Kitchen utensils. Noah disassembled. Chest slashed. Innards strewn. Organs in a pile. Some half-eaten. Sightless eyes staring. Head cracked open. Skull emptied. I realized what I was really craving, Princess Penelope said. I didn't want to wake you, but it was delicious. You have no idea. Katie saw everything. Her degraded face in the mirror. Aches all over. New ones every day. The way the light from the bedside lamp now gave her headaches. That sour smell she didn't recognize on her own breath. I'm the caterpillar. I think so, Katie, Princess Penelope said with real sympathy. But I'll go on. Don't know if it helps, but your memories will live in me. Katie felt herself cry, but no tears came. She imagined them falling inwardly, pooling in her steadily shrinking chamber within the brain that had once been hers. I'm so sorry, sweetie. Let's get ice cream. Rocky Road? It was a nice thought. Princess Penelope knew her so well. Watchers. The asylum's security surveillance room was a claustrophobic chamber adorned with peeling wallpaper, crumbling shelves stacked with aged records, a small wooden desk, and an uncomfortable metal chair that creaked under the most minute amount of weight. A single rotary dial telephone sat on the desk. A thick layer of dust covered every surface but the desk and chair. The dim overhead light bulb flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows across the aging linoleum floor that peeled in the corners. The centerpiece of this dilapidated room was a massive wall lined with outdated, grayscale CCTV monitors. Each monitor displayed a different section of the asylum, a haunting panorama of deserted hallways, medical examination rooms furnished with rusting metal beds and equipment, large dining areas, office spaces, and various other rooms possibly used for forms of recreation. The monitors were ancient, relics of a bygone era. Their screens emitted a faint, sickly glow that seemed to exaggerate the shadows lurking in the corners of the room. The images displayed were grainy, distorted, and pixelated. A small handwritten label accompanied each screen, indicating the location of the video feed. The cameras themselves, once cutting-edge technology, were now obsolete and barely functional, occasionally losing connection for a few seconds at a time. The crackling audio of static from the occasional disconnected video feeds added to the eerie ambiance. It was as if the very essence of the asylum had seeped into the wires and circuits, imbuing an unsettling presence into the surveillance system. James was 2 hours into his new job and already regretted accepting the position. As a college dropout, struggling to make ends meet, the job posting for a part-time security surveillance officer with great pay was almost too good to be true. There were no certifications or education required to apply. The agency didn't even require any previous experience. The pay was nearly double the current minimum wage. The only downside to the posting had been the hours. From 9 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, James was surprised to find he was the only one to accept the position following the interview. Unwilling to let such a good paying opportunity pass, he agreed to all terms he was presented during his interview and had no follow-up questions of his own when asked. As such, he was hired on the spot and given the time and address of his first shift. Looking back, James realized he should have asked at least a few questions, such as where he would be working and why no one else had accepted the position following the interview. Lunaria Sanitarium, built in 1920, was nestled deep within the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The nearest city, taking at least an hour and a half by car, was Portland, Oregon. The hospital consisted of 3 separate buildings. The central 4-story building contained the medical rooms, recreational suites, and other administrative offices. Each 2-story wing building housed bedrooms with minimal furniture, a dining hall complete with rows of tables and chairs, and basements with locked holding rooms. Only the hallway leading to the doors for the holding rooms contained a camera in each basement. Every room in the sanitarium still contained original furniture from the time it was abandoned, as if all inhabitants simply left for the day and never returned. Vacated in the late 50s, the entire property was left untouched for nearly 7 decades. courtyards, fields, and small farming patches were overgrown, nearly reclaimed by the forest whose land it was built upon. Despite the impending vegetation, the buildings themselves were surprisingly in good condition, despite the rust, mold, and rotting surfaces. Upon relieving the daytime officer at 9 o'clock, a gangly old man who provided no explanation of his duties other than not to fall asleep, James settled in for a long night. The metal chair behind the desk protested against his weight, and he made a mental note to bring a cushion for his next shift, figuring he would need help staying awake and being kept from boredom. James brought a backpack stocked with snacks, energy drinks, his handheld gaming console, and a few books his sister had lent him. He had debated whether or not he would get in trouble for playing games or reading while on duty. But how hard could watching screens of empty rooms be? Surely he would get in more trouble for falling asleep rather than being partially distracted. Gaze darting between monitors on the wall before him, a sense of unease settled deep within his gut. The screens were grainy and out of focus, an occasional ripple in the feed, giving the effect of movement and catching his attention. The wall of monitors was so wide that he had trouble viewing every screen without having to turn his head, causing the screens of the opposite side to disappear from his focus entirely. As the minutes ticked by with no changes, James relaxed and pulled his gaming console from his pack. He kept the volume low, just in case, and was careful to peek at the screens between each level of his game. The few games he owned that didn't require internet connection quickly lost his interest. He glanced at the time on his cell phone. 10:30. An hour and a half into his shift, and he was already bored. As James reached for his backpack, the scratchy sound of static caught his attention. One of the screens in the top row, which was labeled East Wing Dining Hall, showed nothing but black, gray, and white interference. Heart leaping into his throat, James watched as the lines danced across the screen. Less than a handful of seconds later, the feed resumed, and he was presented again with long rows of tables and chairs. Breathing a sigh of relief, James slumped back into his chair, the metal groaning in protest. Waiting for his heart rate to settle, James took in the creepy aspects of the dining hall, showing through the feed. Long, wooden tables made up a majority of the space, looking to be made of one solid piece of wood. James could only imagine how heavy they must be. Chairs dotted the spaces between the tables, all pulled out and looked to have been haphazardly pushed around, a few even laying on their sides. In the far left corner of the room, a single door stood open, leading to the hallway beyond. James's attention fixated on the chairs. Had they been pushed out from the tables before? Racking his memory, he thought that they had been pushed in, not that he had paid any special attention to the small details. Clearing his thoughts with a shake of his head, he pulled one of his energy drinks out and popped the cap. Perhaps he just remembered wrong. While sipping the carbonated liquid energy, James pulled out a notebook and pen and began taking notes on the condition of each room, more for the peace of his own mind and to pass the time than any other reason.